Thanks, Tim, for joining us today and volunteering to answer a few questions we have received regarding VHF marine radios.
Absolute pleasure, Vanessa. It's a passion of mine is water safety.
Excellent. Do you need to hold a marine radio license to operate a VHF marine radio?
Yes, you do. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. One of the things that, as someone who listens to a VHF radio quite a lot, we need to learn the correct language to use when we're on a radio. Now, the VHF radio is more used by professionals, and they are the people that are listening in. So it's really good to learn the correct way to use them, and particularly for emergencies, Vanessa.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Tim. Where can you obtain an operator's handbook and a VHF marine radio licence?
Look, your starting point is the Australian Maritime College in Tasmania. Really worth getting hold of a book. It's a thick book, but it's easy to read. Now, the way to get a licence is that you can do it yourself. You can study that book. Plenty of questions in there that you can pre-test yourself. And then you just book in with one of the invigilators in your area that will test you. The other way, of course, is to go through some of the organisations. Some of the Coast Guard flotillas run radio courses, and there are lots of private companies that run courses. So there's a variety of ways of obtaining a licence.
What channel would I call on if I'm in trouble on a boat?
So channels 16 and 67 are the two channels that are set aside for emergency and making contact. So channel 16 would be your preference. Now, those two channels are monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by professional organisations such as Water Police and others. We are really lucky in Victoria that we're monitored around the coast by Marine Radio Victoria up to 20 nautical miles off the coast, which means that all of the bays and inlets pretty well around Victoria, you're going to get good VHF coverage.
If you're in an emergency out on the water, can you use the radio without a licence to call for help?
Absolutely. Yeah, anyone from a young child to anyone who's in the boat in an emergency can grab the radio and call for help. And if it is unable to and might have been injured, absolutely you don't need a licence. You just grab that microphone and start calling.
Often boaters will say, hey, I'm out in Port Phillip Bay and I can actually hear people up in Queensland.
Yeah, that generally weather has a bit to do with that. That's called skip, where your signal shoots up to the ionosphere and bounces back down. Now, in Victoria, during summer or warmer months, we often hear chatter from Tasmania. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to talk to them, but you can hear them.
And often people say, oh, there's a DSC button. What's the use of that button on the radio?
Yeah, the DSC is a digital selective calling, and it's a really handy button to have because you need to apply for an identification number and you'll get a 9-digit identifier. And if you've got that interfaced with your GPS, if you're in trouble and you lift the little hatch and push that button, it will ping out short bursts, about half a second, with all the information that you've got logged. So it will give someone who receives that message will straight away get it as an urgency signal or a mayday, and it will show your latitude and longitude if you've got it connected up to your GPS. So with DSC, if you get hold of that radio operator's handbook, there are about 4 or 5 pages in there just on digital selective calling and how it works and what you need to do as an operator to set that up.
Would you recommend for our boaters to leave their radio on whilst on the water?
Absolutely, and a couple of reasons behind that. As a volunteer rescue group or a professional, we have an obligation to monitor Channel 16 at all times. And that's why all of the volunteer rescue boats around the coast have multiple radios. One of them is always monitoring 16. But for you as a boater, it's good to have it on because if you need to call for help, all you need to do is pick the microphone up and press a button and call for help. But you might also monitor someone calling for help.
Obviously, to ensure that our radios do work, what's the recommended maintenance for our VHF marine radio?
Look, we're very lucky these days, Vanessa, with the way that all our technology is going and the way radios are made. There's not a lot of maintenance you need to do. Probably one of the biggest issues we have on water are electrics. Salt water and electricity don't mix. So make sure that your power connections are nice and clean. Take them off every year, clean them up, put a bit of grease on there, put them back, and just make sure that your aerial is in good condition. And they can shake loose. Sometimes the fitting at the bottom will come loose, and it's an easy fix. You just get some super glue or one of the glues and put in there, and it'll fix it up again. Aerials, people have a habit of leaving them up and driving under trees and garages. Make sure there are no cracks in it, because if you put a crack in your aerial, it may or may not work. And it is your first line of defence, I suppose. If you're in trouble, you're going to grab that radio and call for help.
But when you go out in the water now with Marine Rescue, do you see many boaters with LED lights out there? And if they do have those LED lights, are they going to interfere with the VHF marine radio?
There are some of the older radios around and the cheaper brands, and they can interfere, but certainly the new, better brand radios, no, they don't interfere. And look, they're relatively cheap. $200 to $300 will get you a good brand name VHF radio.
Often people say, oh, I've got my mobile phone, I don't need one on board. What's your opinion on that, the mobile phone to a VHF marine radio?
I would go for both. And the reason for that is that even in Port Phillip and Western Port Bay, there are black spots for mobile phones. And we know of a few where you can be 5 kilometres off the coast and we just can't get coverage on a mobile phone. A VHF radio will. The other thing is that if you call for help, there are people monitoring 24 hours a day. Where a mobile phone, you have to make the call, then the person who receives that has to then forward that information on to the authorities. When a mayday is made, generally people are in panic mode and some of the information might come through as clearly as it's meant to.
Oh, thanks, Tim. That's some great advice you've given us, our boaters out there, and I really appreciate you giving up your time today. And hopefully you won't see Tim out on the water in his marine rescue boat. Thanks again, Tim.
Pleasure, Vanessa. Thanks for having me.